Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I'm talking with Sarah Hobday-Mitchell, Business Continuity Director at Para Excel. Sarah, you and I have spoken on an episode of planning our exercises and tests. We talked about executing our plans and our tabletops and various tests. Now, in our third episode, I'd like to talk about the follow-up. Once we've done all of that, we've held our test. Now, what do we do?
So no matter how short an exercise is, I always leave time at the end to collect those immediate thoughts and feedback from the participants. If I'm only doing a 15-minute exercise, I might just save 3 minutes on the end. If it's an hour-long exercise, I at least save like 10 minutes, because the faster you collect the feedback from the participants, the better. Because too often, as soon as they leave the room or leave the Zoom room, they forget. So I collect the initial feedback. What went well, but what else can we do better? As a facilitator, I used to take very, very detailed notes of everybody, of what they said and things, but now I try to just focus more now in a day of when we're recording a lot of our things anyways, take note of those things to follow back up on, so that I can also, if the room is a bit too quiet, I can say, well, I captured that we need to update this part of our plan to this, that, and the other. I also like to, immediately after the exercise ends and people dissipate, I send an email to just thank people for their time. And then if it's a shorter exercise, I might just say in the email, please let me know if you have any additional thoughts, again, highlighting what went well or what maybe we could do better, as well as if anybody has feedback on me as a facilitator. Like in the last episode where I talked about one of my big screw ups in one exercise planning, I want the participants to call me out on things, because I know no matter how many exercises I do, there's always things I can improve on. I once had somebody write in their form that they wanted me to bake brownies instead of chocolate chip cookies, because I used to bring home baked goods to exercises to try to bring people in. And I thought that was wonderful that was their feedback. Sometimes I will get a little bit more formal and do an actual like survey form. If I'm doing an in-person exercise, I will hand out pieces of paper and pens to let them scribble down some thoughts. So that's the first bit, collecting the information from the participants, because I don't want the after action report or exercise summary to just be my voice and what I think. I want to know what others heard, felt, thought about the exercise. And then again, no matter how short an exercise is, always document it in some shape or form, be it, often when I've done little 15-minute exercises, I do like a 2-page exercise summary. Longer exercises or something that might need a more formal after action report. Jumping back to HCEEP, I try to stick to a template of theirs from like 20 years ago, but I'm a big fan of. Key points for me to always include in that documentation: when was the exercise? Who participated? Because the amount of times I've kind of seen in other places where they maybe don't even capture who participated in the exercise. So was it just me, the facilitator, and a DR person? I hope not. I hope it was a lot more than that. And then I capture in that, what was the scope, the purpose, the objectives, what we've spoken to. A couple sentences on the scenario. Was it, winter storm, ice damage, or whatever the case may be, just a little blurb about what it was. And then those observations, and I, again, going back to HCEEP, it's you have your objectives, you have an observation tied to an objective, and then either area for improvement or something that went well type thing. And I always try to focus not just on the what we need to do better in that report, but highlight the good stuff, so that if you have an auditor or really anybody, when my CEO picks it up, I don't want them to think that the exercise just highlighted all this bad stuff and there was nothing good that came out of it. So focusing in on those really good things that did happen in the exercise. So yeah.
What are your thoughts on, because this is something I do, if you have 2 hour-long tabletop exercises, as an example, 3 months apart, should you compare or as you're planning the second one, looking at that first one and the findings and saying, this is the stuff we need to make sure addressed. And then when you're writing that after action report for the second test, you can say, we built upon the um, gaps, shall we say, that we found in our first one. So now we built on that, and now we're, making it sound good. We found more gaps, that we were unaware of, but we wouldn't have found if we hadn't have fixed these other ones. So, we're constantly moving forward and finding new things. What are your thoughts on making sure that that progression is shown?
Absolutely. Um, and you can also show progression if things go in the other direction. If you say in this exercise, we highlighted that this team didn't follow their SOP, or their SOP was missing this, that, and the other. And then the recommendation or action item was they need to update this plan and retest it or something like that. And then if you run the next exercise 3 months, 6 months later, and they haven't done any of that, then you highlight that as well and say, this is a repeat finding. It was brought up in the previous exercise, all the same participants, nothing was done. Almost, find a kind of nice way to write that. But I tend to I like to start with what happened in the last exercise, read through that report, and see, is there something in that I think is either still a problem, or that the next exercise can highlight that they've improved and they've fixed it, and things. So yeah.
So how do we go about making sure that those actions are actually done then? So you don't have a repeat of the same item, and you're not trying to find nice ways of saying X
Repeat
team
finding.
screwed up again.
I'd say some organizations are better than others when it comes to being able to hold people to actions. Going back again to my Navy civilian days, I ran a monthly executive level business continuity meeting of just, all the kind of, it was basically the second in commands across the business. And every month before, when I would send out the agenda, it was here. I had like an old school Excel template or Excel spreadsheet with all of the open action items from every exercise and incident. And I would email that out and be like, I'm looking for updates. And then often, people would email me right before the agenda, right before the meeting, to let me know, oh yeah, we finally closed that one, or we realized it was too expensive to fix, so it's not viable anymore, whatever the case may be. And then in the meeting, I would just hand pick a couple and just call them out in the meeting, be like, all right, facilities, you've had this action open for a while. What's the status? Where are you on it? And that was a way to try to hold them. But then, the CEO got copied in on things to know if people weren't following up. So that was a bit different. Whereas other places I've been, the business continuity department or person hasn't really had that kind of authority to kind of push senior leadership to do these things. But you have to kind of find like, what can you do, or even if all you're able to do is email the person once a month and say, hey, have you done anything? Otherwise, I like to call them out in exercises of just bringing it back in and something else to kind of highlight, if you have the same repeat finding year after year, 6 months here, like however your frequency is of the exercises, that's something that can really be shown to the C-suite and be like, this is a recurring theme. If this were to happen in real life, we're screwed, or, type thing. So that's how you can really, it's that, do your best and not push too many buttons.
But
But
don't stop nagging.
exactly. I always try to nag as much as I can with it.
Yeah,
Even if it
I,
is,
I
again,
was
just
making,
once a month emailing somebody
yeah,
to
I always
say,
make the joke, I'm sorry to be an old horse, but I'm gonna nag here.
mhm.
These after action reports, how long should it be that they're formalized and everyone sees them after the exercise?
Again, the sooner the better, so that everything is fresh in people's mind. I try my darndest to get the report done within a week, if at all feasibly possible, where it's, again, capturing that initial feedback right at the end of the exercise. And then if there are any stragglers that in the coming days send me an email or anything, I'm already working on the report. I use my notes or anybody else that was a note taker or evaluator in there, putting together that report, putting together my thoughts on the observations and any areas of improvement or recommendations. And then my normal thing I do is I then send it out to everybody that participated and say, here's what I have. Does anyone have any additional, any questions about what I put in, disagree with what I put in? Because if I put in a recommendation that is just completely, maybe I heard it, I didn't quite understand what was being said in the exercise, or it didn't, I'm losing the word in my head, but maybe I just didn't capture it as accurately as it should have been. So that's why I send it out to the participants for them to clarify or say, you know what, it's not actually that team that needs to do it. It's this team or whatever the case may be. And then that also can help spark if they have any additional thoughts. So again, I try to get my report out to everybody within a week, 2 weeks max, but sometimes for a longer exercise, if there's a lot to kind of drill down into, you might need a little more time. And then I try to just give the participants less than a week to respond, and then I can finalize the report. One thing though is if you come up with almost a recommendation for something for a team that maybe wasn't in the exercise, talk to that team first and just say, you know what, I know you weren't in their HR because for whatever reason, but we had this recommendation and this group thought that HR should be doing this. Do you agree? Because I don't want to put something in a report for somebody that, in an action item for somebody that wasn't there, doesn't know the context, because that just tends to piss people off. But again, just really sometimes the faster you can do the report, the better. And I think it goes back to my Navy days is I was on a very strict deadline or it would get written up in like the audit of Sarah didn't do a report too fast enough. And then I always, once the participants agree on everything, it goes up to, for my current role, my skip level person who is in like the executive committee, for her to kind of review and sign off on, basically to say, yes, I bless this document. It is officially final.
My last question, what are your thoughts on having a findings report that says a test or exercise passed or failed?
I am not a fan of pass or fail when it comes to business continuity exercises, just because I think it's very subjective. But I understand that on the DR side, especially, you can absolutely have a fail if this server was or application was supposed to be able to be failed over in X amount of minutes, but it took you 4 times as long, or it didn't fail over at all because something broke. That is a fail, and then you have to repeat it. I understand that, but on like the business continuity side, if I'm just doing a tabletop exercise of, a massive hurricane hitting my office, I don't really know how you fail that, unless it's people either don't show up or don't say anything. Nobody knows their roles, but I've never been in a situation where I would ever consider one of my exercises on the business continuity side as a fail. I know if like I'm doing emergency notification test, I set a threshold of I want 80% of our people to respond within 3 hours, and it's only 50%. Yes, that is a fail, and I need to redo the exercise. But on the BC side, it's just there's not nice cut and dry metrics to say pass fail, in my opinion.
Well, we've come to the end. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share about anything we've talked about so far over our 3 episodes, planning, execution, or post execution, or findings? Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just practice makes permanent. Exercise, exercise, exercise. The more you build that muscle memory, the better prepared you are, and the ready you are for whatever may hit the fan, really. But thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining and sharing your expertise with us, Sarah. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.